Okay guys, what we're gonna do is I'm gonna discuss each of these saber, the pros and the cons. While we're doing the comparison, we just go over the differences in terms of pricing, features, and the pros and cons. So I'm just gonna hold them by one. I'm just gonna hold them one by one, and then we go over the differences. So first of all, the only big major similarities they have is they both carry the name the Acolyte. They're not based on anything of the same game or character. They just carry the same name, the Acolyte. Now both are rated as dual ready sabers. Both have a soundboard installed, and they have more or less similar features. So first of all, just a small comparison in dimensions. You can see the Vaders Vault is bigger by 2 inches, and we show the back, and you can see the differences there. And then we go back here. So before we're gonna discuss the differences between the soundboards, I'm gonna show the prices of these complete sabers side by side, so you have an understanding of the price differences between these two now. On the left you see the pricing for the Vaders Vault Acolyte. On the right you see the pricing for the Saberforge Acolyte as well. So I just leave that on a little bit so you can see the price differences, and just let it sink in a little bit. What are the margins? As you can see, the price difference isn't too much between these two, so they're very comparable in price range, and they're very comparable in what is being advertised for these sabers. So as I said, this has the Crystal Shards light soundboard. This one has the Cybercore soundboard. And now we're going to discuss the differences between the two. So first of all, the Vaders Vault Crystal Shard 3.0 soundboard from Plexter Labs has 5 sound banks, flash on clash, and multiple other configurable features. You can take out the SAD card out of this soundboard, load up your own sound fonts, and basically run the saber of the sound font of your choice. Plus you can make changes to the flickering settings, you can make changes to the brightness settings, you can even make changes to the RGB settings if you have so. Now in this case both sabers are non-RGB sabers. The LEDs are non-RGB, but since the Vaders Vault has a LED with 2 dye colors, for example 2 reds and 1 white LED to make up for the flash on clash, I can actually program the white dye to be the main color, so I can make a 2 color scheme. So I can have red as my main color, but I also can have white as my main color, and even I can even make the reds the flash on clash color. So that is a benefit of the Vaders Vault, I think. Having flash on clash really adds to the immersion. Flash on clash not only between the clashes of your saber hitting something, but also with the auxiliary button that is installed on the Vaders Vault. You have the option to have your multiple sound fonts, including ambient sounds, let's say flash blaster deflection sounds, lockup sounds, whatnot sounds, all being controlled by this button here. So that really gives you more of an immersion in terms of lightning effects by controlling the soundboard controlling the LED unit. Now the NAC Sabercore soundboard actually has only 1 sound font, so you can either choose when you order the lightsaber a light side Viridian sound font or a dark side Crimson sound font. And that's it. You're stuck to that sound font. There's no way you can choose between other sound fonts. You cannot upload another sound font, so you're stuck with what you get. So in that term, there's a big difference between the Vaders Vault and the Saberforge. You have 5 sound banks on the crystal shard. You can change any sound fonts whenever you want on the fly, and you can upload your own sound fonts on one of those 5 sound banks. So you can have 5 sound banks with totally different sound fonts, and versus the Saber core, which only has one sound font, and you're stuck with it the entire duration or the lifespan of the lightsaber. So a definitely big win for the Vaders Vault in this area, because that gives a lot more longevity to the saber. The hilt stays the same, the color of the LED might be the same because you have a single color, or maybe you swap between the flash on class second die, the white die for example, or not, but the lightning is more or less you are stuck with, for example, the LED that you choose if you don't have RGB. So having the option to have multiple sound fonts, etc., is a big plus, because that really changes the feel of the saber when you boot it up and shut it down, etc. It really helps adding more value to the hilt itself, plus the experience that you have with each different sound fonts when you play with this lightsaber. And the Saberforge has, besides, so moving back to the Saberforge, the Saberforge Sabercore sound font is basically managing the 12 plus LED. In this case it's a blood orange, so it gives you multiple options such as flicker and pulse, and the Sabercore is actually managing the 12 plus watt LED. In this case is blood orange. The only option that this LED can have is the flickering, so the Sabercore soundboard only can control the flickering. Well, with the Vaders Vault crystal shard soundboards you have flickering, flash on clash, and you can also configure different options, for example a blade lockup or a blaster reflection, which have maybe a different a pattern of lightning of the white LED, which is used flash on class. So you can have something shorter pulse, longer pulse, something that looks different than the average flash on class pulse, for example. Which is again a plus for the crystal shard soundboard, that it, besides this having more control over the sound fonts, it also has more control over the LED and what it does. So it in terms of lighting and sound, the Vaders Vault is definitely in the benefit here. So another thing that both soundboards do is they control the sensitivity of the motion detection. So for example, if you move the lightsabers like this on the I-axis or on the X-axis, I always forget is this I-axis or X-axis, I always forget, but either way it controls what the saber does. Will it make a sweeping sound? Will it make a flash on clash sound? What will it do when you move it in horizontal or vertical? There's a big difference in there, and also the sensitivity of each board is very different. And besides that, it has to control the speaker. Now these both have 20mm, I think 3 watt bass speakers, and in terms of sound, in loudness, both sabers are equal. I have to admit I'm deaf on one ear. This ear is not working for me, but if I compare them next to each other, there's no difference between those speakers for me. I feel them equally. They're equally loud, and besides the acoustic signature of both sabers, because they have a different pommel design, different hilt design, different length, so the acoustic sound is slightly different in terms of the sound waves moving through the sabers outwards like this. No, that is a little bit different, but I didn't notice any difference there. So in terms of sound output, in terms of decibel, I feel they're on par. There's no difference there for me. So the biggest difference we have now is that the Vaders Vault have a lot better options for the soundboard in terms of sound fonts, etc. It has a lot better LED control There's a lot more control over the LED versus the Saber core has. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna briefly compare the sensitivity between the Sabers. So before we go into actually booting up the Sabers, I want to point out one thing. The Saberforge comes with an in-held recharge port. The Vaders Volt come with a rechargeable battery in a 3D printed chassis. If you do heavy dueling, the Vaders Volt again has a benefit that you actually can swap batteries between a dueling session. When this runs out of battery, you're stuck. You have to recharge it by putting it into a wall charger, so you cannot play with the Saber during that period. So for heavy dueling, this is a more practical option. So I'm gonna first boot it up and then let you listen to the sound of both Sabers. You will hear there's not much of a difference though. So, Vaders Volt. And the Saberforge. Now one thing I have to say, what I don't like about the Saberforge as well, you're stuck with one sound font as I just told, so there's nothing that you can do there. There's no option there. But what I also don't like is there's a popping sound to this Viridian sound font. So after each clash, it will have a pop sound like you hear the reset of the sound font, and it wasn't really cut off properly in a let's say an audio program. So there's like this popping sound with each swing you do, and it's very annoying. Let me just try to show you to let it hear to you guys. Here we go. Pop, pop, pop. You hear that popping sound at the end? That's actually very annoying to me. That does feel pretty crappy to me. I'm not very happy with that. So another thing that both Sabers have is the secondary sound. So the Saberforge has a blaster deflection sound. So you push the same power button or an ignition button to get that sound. That's it. There's nothing else to it. And then the Vaders Volt, it really depends on what sound font you have enabled and loaded up. But it's on the back of the Saber. There's a small auxiliary button, so you just push it once to have that sound. And if you keep it pushed, then you have, like, for example, a lockup sound. Now it can be any sound that is associated with that specifically sound font that you have loaded, but then again, it's another benefit to me because the controls are very high on the emitter in this case, and there are two different buttons for turning on and turning off the Saber, and the auxiliary buttons for giving it different options, where on the Saberforge is on the middle section, and it's only this one button. Now both have cons. If you do heavy dueling and you want to toss in some special effect sounds wearing big gloves, you cannot push in this button. There's no way you can push in this button. It's very hard to get it pushed in here. So if you do heavy dueling, this is not really helpful. And if you do heavy dueling, most of the time your hands will be covered in this area, so it's not very easy to actually engage this button here. It's easier than the Vaders Volt because it's a very small button, but this button is of course bigger, but then again it's not easy because you will lose grip. And since your hands are always on the controls, I think this is a con as well for heavy dueling, having that your hand here. You won't turn off your saber accidentally, but you will never really have the chance to reach to that auxiliary or secondary sound. So both sabers don't really have that really well incorporated for heavy dueling. But again, for heavy dueling, you might be too busy doing other stuff that you don't really want to put then as additional sound fonts. Another thing I don't like about the sound enabled Acolyte for Saberforge is the recharge port is here. If you do a lot of heavy dueling, you're constantly touching the control section plus this recharge port, which is a little bit more sensitive, and I suspect over time they will cause issues. For example, my recharge port is sticking out here a little bit. There's an edge here. Well, I can imagine if you have a seam on your glove and you touch it a lot, this whole recharge port may fall out from the outside, and that cause maybe electronic issues. So I don't like that. So what we do now is just very briefly show the difference in the LEDs. So we're gonna put a blade in there, and then we just show the comparison of the brightness. Before we're gonna fire up and do a comparison in brightness, I want to show you one major difference is that the it's a little bit embarrassing, but the Saberforge socket is having a lot more room on the saber than the Vaders Vault. The Vaders Vault is very stiff around the saber. It feels solid. There's no rattle between the saber and the hilt. Where the Acolyte has a lot of wobble. There's a lot of wobble between the saber and the hilt itself. It really feels wonky. And I noticed that actually on most of my Saberforge hilts, that's the issue with the Saberforge blade. There's a lot of space between the hilt and the hilt socket and the blade itself, which makes it the saber feels really wonky. And it doesn't matter how tight you put that retention screw, because there's just a lot of space from left to right on the blade. You can hear it. This is the space I have between the hilt and the blade. So it really feels shaky from that perspective, where the Vaders Vault with a non-native saber doesn't have it. It's just stiff. It's just one stiff solution. And it's a little bit embarrassing that Saberforge doesn't have that on their own sabers. So anyway, here we go. Now another thing before I fire up, I have to say this is a Saberforge 12+ watt blood orange, fully loaded, fully charged saber, and this is the Vaders Vault Sun Crusher Red. There is a slight difference because red and blood orange are not of the same color spectrum, but it's just a very overall comparison between the two sabers, so please bear with me. It has the Saberforge has the flicker enabled, so you can see there's a nice flicker going on there. And this is the Vaders Vault, and both have a 37-inch blade. And there's also a slight flicker on the Vaders Vault, but it's much more, it's a lot less noticeable. In terms of brightness, I feel they're pretty equal, pretty the same in my opinion, but maybe you'll see something different on the camera. I'm gonna put them down because it's pretty heavy. So I'm gonna move them to here. So again, a big benefit for the Vaders Vault having the plastic glass. You see that really adds to the immersion. It's something that doesn't come on the Vaders Vault, on the Saberforge. And also what I want to point out is the activation button on the Vaders Vault is definitely more comfortable to use to turn on and turn off the hilt, because on the NAC, the neck board from Sabercore, you have to hold it slightly longer before it starts to retract the blade back in. I can show you. And by having to push the button in, you have to push it a little bit deeper, which is a little bit annoying. So here we go, turn it on. So that's more or less the same. Turn it off. I push the buttons in exactly the same time. It's just that it on the Saberforge takes longer, 1 or 2 seconds longer before it goes into the shutdown mode. Now another difference I would like to point out is with the Sabercore soundboard, you can actually make changes to your soundboard on the go, which you cannot do with the crystal shard. With the crystal shard you have to undo the SSD card and put it in the computer and then make changes to the values, so you can change the values of the settings, for example flicker of the LED, the sensitivity and whatnot. You cannot control it from the Saber directly. So in that perspective I have to give the Sabercore a Pro, because a plus, because it's easier to make changes on the fly, for example if you need so. Another thing about the sound quality is that I feel that the Sabercore sound quality of the Viridian soundboard sound font is a little bit muffled. It's a little bit distorted, the sound. It feels a little bit it feels like the speaker is running on the higher volume than it originally should be. So it feels a little bit the sound feels a little bit distorted to me. It doesn't sound that rich. The bass on the Vaders Vault speaker is a lot louder. It's a much richer experience in terms of bass, and the sound quality feels it feels richer and crispier than on the Sabercore. So next what we're gonna do is very short compare the sensitivity between the two Sabers. So we start with the Sabercore. Turn it on. So we start with the horizontal detection. Now I put the settings to all its highest settings, so 7 for sensitivity and 7 for impact sensitivity. So you can see with minimal horizontal movements there is certain detection. Not always, but it not always detect. Like see, out of the 3 wiggles I do, it detects it once or twice. Oh, now it detects more. And a vertical, it doesn't detect anything vertically. Now the soundboard is somewhere here, so I'm just gonna tap it softly to see if it engages a flash on clash, a clash sound. Yeah, that's a swing. This is a swing sound. It's a little bit hard to engage the the clash sound with minimal impact. It really does not impact much of the impact here. See, horizontal detection of the clash sound is easier than vertically. So if you make a swing like this, there's a lot less chance you make a full sound of the clash sound. Okay, we're gonna compare this is the standard Vaders Vault Crystal Shard 3.0 setting. So sensitivity, etc. as if out of the box, because I did not make any setting changes to the soundboard. So let's see. Start horizontal. Vertical. Okay, we're going to try the clash. So one thing you notice is that the Vaders Vault does not consider this a clash sound, it considers this a swing sound, and that is what you want. This is not an actual hit anything. With the Saberforge, it incorrectly every time thinks that is an actual hit. This is not a hit. See, even if I do it hard, it does not engage the clash sound. Now it does, but you need to swing quite hard to do that. Vertically, it does give the clash sound, but it does engage the normal swing sound, but not the actual from that impact sound standpoint. I do think the crystal shard has a better detection on the I-axis and the the X-axis in terms of vertical and horizontal detection of clashes and movements and swings. I feel the Vaders Vault is having a more sensitive soundboard than the Saberforge, which sometimes randomly generates a clash sound or swing sound, or the swing sound, the swing sound font is looped and you ring 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 with one movement. So then again, I feel the Crystal Shard 3.0, which is also a budget line of Plector Labs of their soundboard, I give that a benefit over the Saberforge. In terms of my personal opinion is that the Vaders Vault is the biggest winner here. For the same amount of money you get so much more from the Vaders Vault. The soundboard is so much more richer in terms of the capabilities and full experience versus the Saberforge. And therefore I'm gonna put down the Vaders Vault for a moment, because to come to a conclusion, I don't think it's worth paying that amount of money for the Sabercore. The Sabercore has been very underwhelming to me in terms of performance, in terms of sensitivity, in terms of sound options, in terms of the quality of the sound font itself. It's a really underwhelming package, and Saberforge charge you $120 US or something in that line for their Champion Edition for that soundboard upgrade. And honestly, I don't see why anybody would buy a Saberforge with sound from Saberforge. The soundboard is just underwhelming, to say the least. It's just, I feel the Saberforge Sabercore soundboard for the Champion Edition is an enhanced version of the Hasbro soundboard that you get, let's say, on the Hasbro Black Series lightsaber. I don't think it's a good soundboard. I cannot recommend anybody to purchase a Saberforge with this soundboard, because there is better out there. For the same money you can get so much more. You can get so much more for the same money compared to what Saberforge charges you for. Just my personal opinion. So I hope you like this little comparison video. Hopefully I'll see you in the next video. Stay scummy and take care.